Nobody saw this coming. Not the fans. Not the podcasters. Not even the people standing right in the middle of it. What started as a simple music challenge, 20 songs against 20 songs, turned into the most personal, the most vicious, and the most uncomfortable hip-hop confrontation we have seen in years. Maybe ever. And by the time the dust started to settle, reputations were damaged, family trauma was weaponized on live streams watched by hundreds of thousands of people, and the entire culture was forced to ask itself a question it has been avoiding for a long time. How far is too far? Where's the line? And what happens when somebody doesn't just cross it, but burns the bridge behind them so nobody can walk it back? Because that is exactly what happened here. A bridge got burned, and the flames haven't stopped spreading. Curtis Jackson, the man the world knows as 50 Cent, has spent more than 2 decades perfecting the art of psychological warfare in hip-hop. He has dismantled careers with a single Instagram post. He has turned serious grown men into punchlines that follow them for the rest of their lives. He did it to Ja Rule so effectively that people still crack jokes about it in 2026. He did it to Rick Ross. He did it to The Game. He even did it to Floyd Mayweather during the Ice Bucket Challenge era, turning a charity moment into one of the most savage roasts the internet has ever witnessed. The man is, without question, one of the most dangerous trolls popular culture has ever produced. His record in online warfare is practically undefeated. Practically. But this time, something different happened. This time, 50 Cent picked a fight with a family that didn't flinch. A family that didn't just clap back with a subtweet or a passive-aggressive Instagram story. No, the Harris family, T.I., King Harris, Domani Harris, came back with diss tracks, music videos, Instagram live rants that broke the internet, and verbal grenades so personal that even people who had no stake in the fight winced when they heard them. And by the end of it, some of the most respected voices in hip-hop, Boosie Badazz, Joe Budden, Angela Yee, were all saying the same thing in different ways. 50 Cent might have finally met his match. Not because the Harris family out-trolled him, but because they out-escalated him. They took the fight to a place so dark, so personal, so emotionally raw that even 50's legendary ability to turn everything into a joke could not neutralize it. And the moment that changed everything, the single moment that turned this from a regular rap beef into something the culture will be dissecting for years, was when a 21-year-old kid named King Harris looked into his phone camera on Instagram Live, with thousands of people watching in real time, and said words that made the entire internet go silent. He told 50 Cent to go dig up his dead mother's grave. Let that sit for a moment, because the weight of that sentence is not something you can just scroll past. When King Harris said those words, when he told a man whose mother died in a suspicious fire when he was 8 years old to go dig her up, something shifted in the atmosphere of this entire situation. It stopped being entertainment. It stopped being content. It became something else entirely. Something heavier. Something that people in barbershops in Atlanta and podcast studios in New York and living rooms across the entire country are still debating right now as you read this. And the craziest part? Depending on who you ask, King Harris was either completely justified or completely out of line. There is almost no middle ground on this one. The culture is split right down the center. And that split, that inability to reach consensus on whether this was righteous family defense or unforgivable cruelty, is exactly what makes this situation so fascinating and so important to break down properly. So let us do exactly that. From the very beginning, every detail, every escalation, every reaction, every consequence. Because this story is deeper than any headline or 30-second clip can capture. And if you only caught pieces of it through social media, you are missing critical context that changes the way the entire picture looks. Let us start where it all began. And the origin point is honestly kind of absurd when you consider how far things eventually spiraled. For years, and we are talking multiple years here, T.I. had been publicly and repeatedly challenging 50 Cent to a versus battle. For those unfamiliar, versus is a music competition format where 2 artists go head-to-head, playing 20 of their biggest songs against each other while fans watch and vote in real time. It became a massive cultural phenomenon, especially during the pandemic era, and it turned into a platform where legacy artists could remind the world exactly how deep their catalogs run. T.I. wanted that stage. He wanted to stand across from 50 Cent and prove, song for song, that his catalog could hold its own against one of the best-selling rappers in history. And on paper, that matchup makes perfect sense. Both artists dominated the mid-2000s. Both had massive commercial hits. Both shaped the sound of an entire generation. A T.I. vs. 50 Cent versus would have been appointment viewing for millions of hip-hop fans. Then, on February 6, 2026, T.I. appeared on Shannon Sharpe and Chad Okosinko-Johnson's Nightcap podcast and turned up the pressure. Sitting right there in front of the cameras, T.I. looked into the lens and essentially told the world that 50 Cent was ducking the challenge. He said, and this is a direct quote, "He don't want no parts of this." That was a public dare. A gauntlet thrown down on one of the most popular sports and culture podcasts in the country. And the clips from that interview traveled everywhere. Every hip-hop blog picked it up. Every fan page reposted it. The debate was reignited instantly. Could T.I. really go bar for bar with 50? Was 50 avoiding the battle? The energy was electric and the anticipation was building. But here is the critical thing you need to understand about 50 Cent. And if you have followed his career for any length of time, you already know this instinctively. 50 does not play by the traditional rules of hip-hop beef. He never has. Most artists, when challenged, respond by going into the studio and recording a track. They answer bars with bars, music with music. That is the traditional protocol. That is how hip-hop disagreements have been handled since the beginning. But 50 Cent rewrote that playbook a long time ago. His weapon of choice has never been the recording booth. It has been the internet. His strategy, refined over more than 20 years, is devastatingly simple and devastatingly effective. He trolls you. He mocks you. He posts embarrassing photos. He creates memes. He turns the entire situation into comedy. And once the internet starts laughing at you instead of with you, the battle is effectively over. You have already lost. Not because your music was worse, but because the narrative shifted and you became the joke. This strategy has worked against almost everyone who has ever gone up against 50. Ja Rule learned it the hard way. Rick Ross experienced it. The game went through it. Fat Joe felt it. Even people outside of hip-hop, business people, television executives, former associates, have been on the receiving end of 50's relentless online mockery. The man does not get tired. He does not feel guilt. And he does not stop until he has decided that the other person has been sufficiently humiliated. So when T.I. issued that public challenge on the Nightcap podcast, 50 Cent did not respond by accepting the versus. He did not go into the studio. He did not release a statement through his publicist. Instead, he went to Instagram. And what he did next is what set this entire catastrophic chain of events into motion. On February 22nd, 2026, and this date is absolutely critical to the timeline because it is the day everything fundamentally changed. Curtis 50 Cent Jackson posted a photograph of T.I.'s wife, Tamika "Tiny" Harris, on his Instagram page. According to multiple reports, the caption was dismissive and condescending, essentially telling her to stay out of business that did not concern her. But the nature of the post itself went beyond that. Complex magazine, in their coverage of the situation, reported that 50 shared a meme calling T.I.'s wife and son ugly. That is a direct quote from their reporting, not a paraphrase. A direct quote. Now let us be absolutely, unambiguously clear about something. Tiny Harris had zero involvement in the beef between 50 Cent and T.I. She had not posted about 50. She had not commented on the versus challenge. She had not thrown any subliminal messages or shade in his direction. She was completely uninvolved. The disagreement was between two men, two adult men, arguing about a music competition. And yet, suddenly, without provocation, Tiny Harris found herself dragged directly into the center of a public spectacle that she had no part in creating. That decision by 50 Cent shocked a significant number of people in the hip-hop community. Because even within the context of 50's legendary trolling history, a history that includes some genuinely outrageous moments, targeting someone's wife in a dispute that she had nothing to do with felt qualitatively different. It did not feel like standard internet humor or typical rap beef antics. It felt calculated. It felt like a deliberate attempt to provoke a reaction so intense that it would go beyond normal back and forth. Multiple commentators at the time noted that this appeared to be 50 trying to bait T.I. into doing something reckless. And whether that was the actual intent or not, the effect was undeniable. The temperature of the situation went from warm to volcanic in a matter of hours. Boosie Badazz, who would later become one of the most important voices in the broader conversation around this beef, addressed the tiny post directly during an interview. His words were blunt and unfiltered, which is exactly what people expect from Boosie. He said, and this is a quote, "Honestly, what has wife got to do with anything? The family thing, it's just weird. Them two brothers got a problem. Keep going at each other if that's what you're going to do." That assessment captured what a huge portion of the culture was feeling. The wife post felt gratuitous. It felt like a boundary was being tested. And as events would very quickly prove, the test got a response that nobody, including, possibly, 50 Cent himself, was fully prepared for. Because the first person to publicly retaliate was not T.I. It was not a fellow rapper or a music industry heavyweight. It was T.I.'s 21-year-old son, King Harris. And his response was not diplomatic. It was not measured. It was not filtered through a publicist or edited for public consumption. King Harris jumped directly onto Instagram Live and unleashed an emotional firestorm while thousands of viewers watched every single second unfold in real time. The energy was immediate and overwhelming. King was visibly heated. His words came fast and forceful. He made his position unambiguous from the very first sentence. Disrespecting his mother was not something he was going to tolerate from anyone, regardless of how famous or powerful that person might be. He said, and this is a direct quote, "I don't play about my mama. I wasn't raised like that. My dad is Tip. That's how I'm raised. I don't play like this." There was no performance in those words. No social media posturing. Just raw, unprocessed fury from a young man who felt his family had been violated publicly and who was not willing to wait for someone else to handle it. But then came the moment that fundamentally altered the trajectory of this entire situation. The moment that turned a heated Instagram Live rant into something that made the entire culture collectively hold its breath. King Harris pivoted from defending his mother to attacking 50 Cent's most painful personal history. He brought up Sabrina Jackson, 50 Cent's mother, a woman who died tragically in a suspicious apartment fire in South Jamaica, Queens, in 1983. Curtis Jackson was 8 years old when it happened. 8. Investigators at the time believed that someone had drugged Sabrina, rendered her unconscious, and then deliberately set the apartment on fire. The case was treated as a likely homicide. That loss is arguably the foundational trauma of 50 Cent's entire life story. It shaped his worldview, his personality, his music, his relentless drive, his trust issues, everything. He has spoken about it in interviews spanning decades. It is not a footnote in his biography. It is the opening chapter. And King Harris invoked it, publicly, on a live stream being watched by thousands and thousands of people. He essentially said, and the specific phrasing here matters because of how devastating it was, that if 50 Cent wants to post pictures of other people's mothers, he should post his own. Except he cannot, because she is dead. And then King told him to go dig her up. Want to say something about my mama? Your mama dead. Your mama dead. Go dig her up. Go dig her up. The silence that followed those words, even in the chaotic, fast-moving world of Instagram Live comment sections, was palpable. For a few seconds, even the most vocal participants in the live stream seemed to collectively pause, because everyone watching understood, instinctively, that a line had just been obliterated. Not crossed. Obliterated. There was no ambiguity about what had just happened. A 21-year-old had just told one of the most powerful figures in hip-hop to exhume his murdered mother's body. On camera, in front of the world. And King Harris was not finished. Not remotely. He then shifted his aim to another deeply sensitive aspect of 50 Cent's life. His fractured relationship with his eldest son, Marquise Jackson. The estrangement between 50 and Marquise has been public knowledge for over a decade. It has played out across social media posts, interviews, court documents related to child support disputes with Marquise's mother Shaniqua Tompkins, and even in the subtext of 50's music. It is one of the most frequently cited contradictions in 50's public persona, a man who projects total dominance and control in every area of life, yet who cannot maintain a relationship with his own firstborn child. King Harris weaponized that contradiction with surgical precision. On the live stream, he said, and this is a paraphrase drawn from multiple reports of the broadcast, that all of 50's money, all of his television deals, All of his business empire, all of his Hollywood success means absolutely nothing if the end result is a man sitting alone, disconnected from his own flesh and blood. Then King delivered the most cutting version of that idea. You rich, but you not loved. Money means nothing without no one to spend it with. Your son don't love you. That was not a wild, unfocused outburst. That was targeted psychological demolition. King Harris knew exactly where 50 Cent's emotional vulnerabilities were, and he aimed for every single one of them with devastating accuracy. The dead mother, the estranged son, the isolation beneath the wealth. Each point was chosen deliberately, each one connected. The internet erupted. The reactions were instantaneous, intense, and deeply divided. Clips from the live stream spread across every social media platform within minutes. Comment sections became battlegrounds. On one side stood people who believed King Harris was absolutely right to defend his mother with whatever weapons he had available. Their argument was straightforward. 50 Cent initiated the personal attacks by posting Tiny. When you disrespect someone's mother publicly, you forfeit the right to complain about what comes back at you. Many fans expressed admiration for King's loyalty and his willingness to confront a figure as imposing as 50 Cent without hesitation. Comments flooded social media saying things like, "That's how you're supposed to move when it comes to your family," and "King got that fire in him. You can tell T.I. raised him right." On the opposite side stood an equally vocal group who believed King had crossed a boundary that should never be crossed under any circumstances. Their argument was also straightforward. There is an enormous moral difference between defending your living mother from online disrespect and mocking a man's deceased mother who was murdered when he was a child. Sabrina Jackson did not choose to be part of this conflict. She has been gone for over 40 years. Using her death, the manner of her death, the permanence of her absence, as ammunition in an Instagram beef was, in these people's eyes, not defense. It was cruelty dressed up as loyalty. And then there was a third contingent. People who were simply exhausted and bewildered by the sheer absurdity of the escalation. These were the voices saying, this entire situation started because one rapper challenged another rapper to play 20 songs. How on earth did we end up here? And that perspective, perhaps more than any other, captures the fundamental dysfunction at the heart of this entire saga. The distance between a friendly versus challenge and telling someone to dig up their mother's corpse is so vast, so incomprehensible, that the escalation itself becomes the story. But the drama did not end with King's livestream. Not even close. The livestream was merely the opening act. On February 24th, 2026, King Harris took the confrontation from social media into the recording studio. He dropped a full diss track titled Made Man, released it on major streaming platforms, and even shot a professional music video to accompany it. The visual showed King standing in a parking garage surrounded by expensive foreign cars, wearing a red hoodie and beanie, delivering his bars with genuine conviction and confidence. According to Hot New Hip Hop's coverage, one of the standout lines was, and this is a quote, "Speaking on my mama, I tell Chaz ring the alarm, probably cross his legs and fold his arms." The delivery was aggressive. The intent was unmistakable. Some observers questioned the wisdom of a relatively unknown 21-year-old releasing a diss track aimed at one of the most battle-tested figures in rap history. From a pure strategic standpoint, the mismatch was obvious. 50 Cent has been navigating and winning public feuds since before King Harris was born. But strategy was clearly not what motivated King in that moment. Maternal loyalty was. And whether you agree with his methods or not, the conviction behind the music was undeniable. 2 days later, on February 26th, the situation escalated again when T.I.'s other son, Domani Harris, entered the fray with his own contribution. Domani released a track called Ms. Jackson, a title that was unmistakably, deliberately a direct reference to 50 Cent's late mother, Sabrina Jackson. The song sampled the classic Outkast record of the same name, adding another layer of cultural weight to the release. But it was the cover art that truly made people uncomfortable. According to Hip Hop DX's reporting, the artwork depicted a house engulfed in flames, a visual reference that was widely and immediately interpreted as an allusion to the fire that killed Sabrina Jackson in 1983. That cover art crossed into territory that even some of King Harris's most vocal supporters found difficult to defend. Referencing someone's mother's name in a diss track title is one level of escalation. Depicting the manner of her death on the artwork is something else entirely. It transforms the attack from verbal to visual. It makes the cruelty tangible in a way that words alone cannot. And it ensured that the conversation around this beef would no longer be about who had better bars or who won the exchange. It became a conversation about ethics, boundaries, trauma, and what the culture is willing to accept. Then on March 6th, Billboard reported that both King and Domani released additional tracks targeting 50. King put out a song called Drop Top, continuing his offensive with fresh material, while Domani kept the pressure going with more bars of his own. The Harris family was not slowing down. If anything, they were accelerating. Father and sons, operating as a unified front, treating this conflict like a military campaign rather than a casual rap disagreement. King also reportedly shared an old explicit photograph that allegedly showed 50 Cent in a compromising position. He posted it to his Instagram story accompanied by the hashtag #NoAI, which was his way of asserting that the image was authentic and unedited. That move expanded the battlefield even further, from music and verbal attacks into the realm of personal humiliation. Meanwhile, T.I. himself was far from silent. Over a span of roughly 48 to 72 hours in late February, T.I. released 3 separate diss tracks aimed at 50 Cent. The first was titled The Right One, which he reportedly delivered to Hot 107.9, Atlanta's premier hip-hop radio station. The second was called What Bully. The third was Lessons. According to coverage from Just Jared, All Hip Hop, and multiple other outlets, this triple release represented one of the most aggressive musical responses to beef that anyone in the industry had mounted in recent memory. T.I. was clearly in full combat mode. And according to TMZ, in an interview published on March 3rd, T.I. framed his actions entirely through the lens of family protection. This was not about ego, he said. Not about clout. Not about proving anything to the hip-hop world. It was about defending the people he loves. When a hip-hop conflict reaches this magnitude, when it generates this many tracks, this many viral moments, this many headlines, the entire culture transforms into a panel discussion. Everyone has a take. Barbers debating while fading hairlines. Uber drivers weighing in between pickups. Co-workers arguing at the water cooler. Grandmothers who do not even listen to rap somehow knowing the broad strokes of the situation because it showed up in their Facebook feed. That is the level this reached. It transcended hip-hop and became a genuine cultural event. Now we need to talk about Boosie Badazz. Because when Boosie speaks on situations like this, the culture listens with a different level of attentiveness. And there is a very good reason for that. Boosie is not a podcast personality reacting to drama from a comfortable studio. He is someone who has lived the realities that most rappers only describe in their music. He survived the Louisiana prison system. He faced capital murder charges. He has buried friends. He has navigated poverty, violence, legal battles, health crises, and public scrutiny for decades. His perspective carries weight not because he has the largest platform, but because his credibility is rooted in lived experience that cannot be fabricated or performed. When Boosie addressed the King Harris and 50 Cent situation, he approached it with characteristic directness. The first thing he did was validate King's anger. He did not dismiss the young man or call him foolish or reckless. He recognized the source of the emotion. In Boosie's assessment, the catalyst for everything was 50 Cent's decision to bring Tiny Harris into a conflict that had absolutely nothing to do with her. Mothers and wives, Boosie argued, represent sacred territory regardless of what city you come from, what neighborhood you grew up in, or what set you claim. That respect transcends geography and affiliation. It is foundational to the culture. But Boosie's analysis was not one-sided. Even though he understood why King exploded, he could not endorse the specific words that were used. When Boosie recounted what King said about Sabrina Jackson, the instruction to go dig up a dead woman's grave, there was a heaviness in his tone that went beyond commentary. He described the moment as dark, as something that would be extremely difficult for anyone to forgive or forget. He observed that telling someone to visit their mother's grave as an insult, telling them to put flowers on a tombstone as a way of mocking their loss, represents a form of disrespect that exists on a completely different plane than ordinary beef. Then Boosie articulated something that essentially became the thesis of the entire public conversation around this situation. He said that in hip-hop, there has always been an understood line, a boundary that separates competitive aggression from genuine personal destruction. And once someone crosses that line by bringing up a deceased parent, the conflict moves into territory where traditional resolution mechanisms, phone calls, mutual friends mediating, public handshakes at events, simply may not work anymore. The damage becomes permanent. The scars become part of the landscape. Boosie also raised a crucial practical point that many online commentators were overlooking in the heat of the moment. This was, from the start, a massive mismatch. King Harris is 21 years old, still in the early stages of figuring out his public identity. 50 Cent is a battle-hardened veteran who has been winning wars of perception since the early 2000s. For more than 2 decades, 50 has perfected the art of converting personal conflicts into viral entertainment. He does not even need to produce superior music to win. All he needs is for the internet to start laughing at the other person. Once that happens, the dynamic shifts irreversibly. Boosie understood this dynamic intimately and was essentially trying to warn King that the game he was playing had consequences he might not fully appreciate. And Boosie was not merely talking about consequences that play out on social media timelines. He was talking about real-world ramifications. He said explicitly that if King continued moving with that level of reckless intensity, it could eventually lead to serious trouble that transcends the digital space entirely. This was not hyperbole from Boosie. This was a man speaking from the hard-earned wisdom of someone who has personally witnessed how quickly situations spiral when emotions override judgment. He has attended funerals that started as arguments. He has seen escalation lead to outcomes that no amount of Instagram followers or streaming numbers can undo. Boosie even connected the conversation to his own family, specifically his son Tootie Raw. He shared that he had already counseled his son, Tootie's mother, and even Tootie's grandmother about the dangers of reckless behavior and unchecked aggression. The message was consistent. Consequences are inevitable. They may be delayed, but they always arrive. And speaking of Tootie Raw, the situation somehow managed to expand even further. Reports surfaced that Tootie Raw posted messages directed at King Harris, warning him to be careful about the energy he was projecting. King, predictably, did not back down. He fired back at Boosie directly, questioning why Boosie felt the need to insert himself into a situation that did not involve him. Just like that, the conflict had sprouted a new branch. It was no longer confined to 50 Cent versus T.I. Now Boosie's camp was entangled as well. What made Boosie's involvement additionally complicated was pre-existing tension between himself and T.I. In previous interviews, Boosie had publicly accused T.I. of cooperating with law enforcement during a past legal matter, claiming there was documentation to support the allegation. So Boosie's commentary was not coming from a place of pure neutrality. There was historical friction embedded in the relationship. Yet even with that backdrop, Boosie maintained one unwavering position throughout. Bringing family members into rap beefs crosses a line that the culture should not normalize. And that consistency is precisely why his perspective resonated so deeply. Joe Budden also provided substantive commentary that added meaningful dimension to the conversation. On his widely followed podcast, Budden initially acknowledged the sheer intensity of the situation, noting that the 50 stuff is tough. But then he did something unexpected. He gave T.I. genuine credit for his strategic response. Budden argued that T.I.'s decision to answer with actual music, structured diss tracks with real production, real bars, real intent, was essentially the optimal counter-strategy against someone like 50 Cent. The reasoning was logical and sound. 50's trolling thrives when opponents engage with him on social media, where he controls the terrain. But when an artist shifts the battlefield to the studio, where lyrical content and musical quality become the measuring sticks, the advantage that trolling provides diminishes significantly. Music forces the conversation back into the domain where artistic merit matters. As the beef progressed, Budden reportedly shifted his overall assessment even further. According to coverage including a video titled, Joe Budden says 50 Cent lost the beef after T.I.'s sons Domani and King Harris dropped diss tracks, Budden began crediting the Harris family with the overall advantage. The reasoning was primarily volumetric. The combined output of T.I. dropping 3 tracks, King dropping Made Man, and Drop Top, and Domani dropping Ms. Jackson constituted a coordinated offensive that 50 had not faced before. The Harris family essentially overwhelmed his playbook through sheer output and emotional intensity. Angela Yee provided additional perspective through her coverage on the Way Up podcast. T.I. sat down with Angela Yee and Mano around March 5th for an extended conversation about the situation. During that interview, according to reports from Newsbreak and other outlets, T.I. expressed genuine discomfort with certain aspects of how events had unfolded. He reiterated that his response was motivated purely by family protection. But he also made a remarkably honest admission that added enormous nuance to the situation. Billboard published an article on March 4th with the headline, T.I. says he didn't enjoy his kids joining 50 Cent beef, admits son King crossed the line. That admission deserves significant attention. T.I., the patriarch, the man whose family was attacked first, the person with the most justifiable reason to defend the aggressive response, publicly acknowledged that his own son went too far. That tells you something important about the gravity of what King said. If even the target of 50 Cent's initial disrespect believes the retaliation exceeded acceptable limits, then the culture's ambivalence about the situation is not just a matter of differing fan allegiances. It reflects a genuine moral complexity that does not resolve neatly in either direction. And then came a development that nobody anticipated. While all of this chaos was unfolding, the diss tracks, the live streams, the headlines, the viral clips, 50 Cent did something that stunned virtually everyone paying attention. He started deleting his posts. According to All Hip Hop, on approximately February 24th, 2026, 50 Cent wiped his Instagram almost entirely clean of T.I.-related content. The disrespectful tiny photograph disappeared. The trolling memes were removed. The shots at the family vanished. All Hip Hop's reporting described it this way. 50 Cent's sudden Instagram purge has fans wondering if the long-brewing tension with T.I. has finally been quietly laid to rest. The interpretations of this move were predictably divided. One camp viewed it as an unprecedented moment of retreat from the internet's most notorious troll. In their reading, 50 had finally encountered a family willing to match his energy and exceed it, and the deletion was an acknowledgement that the situation had escalated beyond what even he could comfortably manage. The opposing camp argued that this was simply 50's standard operating procedure. He frequently deletes posts after they have served their purpose, treating his Instagram feed as a constantly refreshed canvas rather than a permanent archive. Weeks later, around March 13th, 50 Cent himself seemingly addressed the deletions. According to both Complex and Billboard, he offered a characteristically dismissive explanation. "I don't want your ugly face on my page." Even the explanation was a jab. That is 50 Cent in distilled form, incapable of offering a straightforward response when a cutting one is available. But regardless of his stated rationale, the timing of the deletion was conspicuous. It occurred immediately following King Harris's incendiary Instagram live session and in the midst of the Harris family's coordinated musical assault. Whether 50 was genuinely retreating or merely performing routine digital housekeeping, the optics told a specific story. And in hip-hop, a culture where perception frequently outweighs reality, optics carry enormous weight. The supposed retreat, however, proved temporary. On March 6th, Hot New Hip Hop reported that 50 Cent released his own diss track targeting T.I. and the Harris family, featuring stars Leon Thomas. So the conflict continued churning forward, with neither side willing to let the other have the final word. Stepping back from the chronological timeline, this entire saga illuminates something profound about the current state of hip-hop culture and the unwritten rules that have governed it for decades. There have always been boundaries in rap beef. They are not codified anywhere. There is no official rulebook, but the culture understands them intuitively. You can ridicule someone's music. You can question their commercial relevance. You can joke about their appearance, their fashion choices, their romantic life. You can challenge their authenticity and their street credibility. All of that has been considered fair territory since the earliest days of hip-hop competition. But families, particularly mothers, wives, and children, have traditionally existed behind a protective barrier that most participants in the culture have respected. Not because violating it is technically prohibited, but because the culture recognizes that once family becomes ammunition, you are no longer engaging with an artist. You are attacking a human being at their most vulnerable. And human beings who feel attacked at that level do not respond proportionally. They respond desperately. They respond recklessly. They respond in ways that cannot be taken back. That is precisely what happened here. 50 Cent allegedly crossed the family line first by targeting Tiny. King Harris crossed it further by weaponizing the death of Sabrina Jackson. Domani Harris arguably crossed it even further by titling his diss track after 50's deceased mother and using cover art depicting a house in flames. Each successive escalation made the previous one seem relatively tame by comparison. And now the culture is standing in a place where reconciliation seems almost impossible. You cannot unsay what King said on that livestream. You cannot unrelease a song called Ms. Jackson with a burning house on the cover. You cannot unpost a disrespectful photograph of someone's uninvolved wife. This is the phenomenon that Boosie was warning about. Once certain lines are crossed, the damage becomes structural. It is embedded in the foundation of the relationship between the parties involved. Apologies might be offered eventually. Handshakes might occur at industry events. But the memory of what was said, the specificity of the cruelty, the public nature of its delivery, persists indefinitely. In the digital age, it persists literally, preserved in screen recordings and reposted clips that will circulate for years. And this raises a broader question that the culture has been increasingly forced to confront. We celebrate trolling. We celebrate the art of getting someone online. We share the memes, repost the most savage jabs, watch the live streams, subscribe to the reaction channels. And most of the time, it functions as entertainment. It is content. It generates engagement, discussion, debate. It keeps the culture vibrant and dynamic. But what happens when the trolling touches genuine trauma? What happens when the person being ridiculed lost their mother to a suspected murder when they were a child barely old enough to understand death? What happens when the joke involves targeting a woman who played no role in the dispute, reducing her to a punchline in someone else's feud? That is the moment when entertainment reveals its darker potential. That is when the game stops functioning as a game and begins inflicting real harm on real people. And that inflection point is exactly what occurred in this situation. 50 Cent has deployed his trolling methodology against numerous opponents over the years, and in almost every instance, the outcome has been the same. He provokes, the opponent reacts emotionally, the internet laughs at the reaction, and 50 emerges as the perceived victor. The formula is elegant in its simplicity and devastating in its effectiveness. But this time the formula encountered a variable it was not designed to handle. The Harris family did not merely react emotionally online. They mobilized comprehensively. Father, sons, recording studio, streaming platforms, Instagram Live, music videos, radio drops. The response was coordinated, relentless, and multi-pronged. And it introduced a level of personal viciousness that neutralized 50's ability to frame the situation as comedy. You cannot meme your way out of someone telling you to dig up your dead mother. That is not a moment the internet laughs at. That is a moment the internet recoils from. Joe Budden recognized it. Angela Yee documented it. Boosie diagnosed it. Shannon Sharpe's platform inadvertently helped catalyze it. Even the Atlanta Journal-Constitution ran a piece on March 4th, 2026, observing that the beef had demonstrated neither artist actually needs a versus to capture the culture's attention, a point that was simultaneously true and deeply ironic given how the whole situation started. So where does everything stand as of now? The situation remains active and unresolved as of mid-March 2026. King Harris's diss track, Made Man, has continued to accumulate streams on major platforms. Domani's Ms. Jackson remains one of the most discussed and debated tracks of the year so far. T.I. has maintained his public presence, conducting interviews including his appearance with Angela Yee and continuing to address the beef on various platforms. According to the source, he is also working on what he has described as his final album, which adds an additional layer of narrative significance to this period of his career. 50 Cent released his own diss track and provided his characteristically sardonic explanation for the Instagram deletions. And Boosie, through his attempt to provide elder statesman perspective, inadvertently found himself entangled in a secondary conflict with King Harris. But the fundamental question that has defined this entire situation continues to echo through every space where hip-hop lives and breathes. It is the question Boosie raised. The question Joe Budden circled. The question Angela you let T.I. grapple with on air. The question that has no clean, comfortable answer. When a rap beef escalates to the point where someone invokes a man's murdered mother. When the cover art of a diss track depicts the fire that killed her. When a 21-year-old tells a man to go exhume his parents' body. Where do you go from there? In hip-hop, disrespect is a constant. It is woven into the competitive DNA of the genre. Artists have been exchanging verbal hostilities since the very first MCs started battling at block parties in the Bronx. But even within that tradition of aggressive competition, certain boundaries have been understood to exist. Certain targets have been considered off-limits. Certain words, once spoken, cannot be retracted. And certain wounds, once inflicted, do not heal. This situation embodies all of those truths simultaneously. It is a case study in how quickly a dispute can metastasize when the unwritten rules are abandoned. It is a cautionary tale about what happens when the culture's appetite for content and escalation collides with real human pain and real family trauma. And it is an ongoing story, one that, based on every available indication, has not yet reached its conclusion. Was King Harris justified in defending his mother even though his methods included weaponizing the death of Sabrina Jackson? Did 50 Cent initiate this entire catastrophe by bringing Tiny into a dispute she had no involvement in? Is Boosie correct that the damage done here may be permanent and irreversible? Or is this simply hip-hop operating the way it always has? Artists testing limits, pushing boundaries, and forcing the culture to continuously redefine what it will and will not accept. There is no consensus, and perhaps there should not be, because the absence of an easy answer is precisely what makes this situation worth examining carefully and honestly.